Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has welcomed the UN Security Council meeting held exclusively to discuss the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Khan said it is for the first time in over 50 years that the world's highest diplomatic forum has taken up the disputes. The Prime Minister said the meeting was a reaffirmation of 11 resolutions recognizing the Kashmiris' right to self-determination. Khan said it is the responsibility of the Security Council to address the suffering of Kashmir's people. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the Kashmir issue has been internationalized after yesterday's UN Security Council meeting. At a press briefing in Islamabad, Qureshi said Pakistan will intensify its lobbying efforts to highlight the situation in occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Minister said dedicated Kashmir desks would be created at Pakistan's embassies all over the world. Meanwhile, military spokesman Major General Asif Ghafoor said Pakistan is ready to thwart any misadventure by India. Ghafoor said Kashmiris would soon respond to India's illegal actions against them. Now, meanwhile, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Dr. Maliha Lodhi, has said the voice of Kashmiris has been heard around the world after Friday's Security Council meeting. Earlier, in an interview with Indus News, Lodhi said occupied Kashmir has been turned into a jail. Dr. Maliha Lodhi said several countries wanted an independent investigation into Indian atrocities in Indian-occupied Kashmir. She also highlighted other aspects of the UNSC meeting.
Two other aspects of the Council meeting are extremely important from Pakistan's point of view. One, the fact that the meeting took place at all testified to the international nature of the dispute and nullified India's claim and its propaganda that Jammu and Kashmir is an internal matter. Secondly, the most important aspect of the meeting was also that there was almost unanimous concern about the grave human rights situation in occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Dr. Lodhi explained how seriously the international community is taking the Kashmir issue.
We've entered a significantly different phase in terms of world attention on the plight of the Kashmiris. If you look at international opinion as reflected in leading newspapers like the New York Times, the Guardian, the Financial Times, you name it, and Western public opinion as reflected in these publications are very clear. Concern for human rights and urging India to halt its crackdown as well as its lockdown in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In addition, if you look at the statements coming out from virtually every human rights organization, reputable human rights organization in the world, all have spoken out. All have asked India to halt the kind of restrictions, abuse, and violations that are going on.
Dr. Maliha Lodhi also told Indus News the steps that Pakistan is going to take after this meeting.
We will assess the situation. We will see what would be the next step. But one thing I can assure you, Pakistan's diplomatic efforts, which have intensified since August 5 in response to India's illegal annexation of Jammu and Kashmir, those efforts will be stepped up, and we will continue to ensure that we are able to act on behalf of the Kashmiri people.
Now, despite the meeting at the UNSC, India's lockdown of occupied Kashmir continues. It's been 2 weeks since communications, including telephone and internet, are completely cut off, isolating people from the outside world. Meanwhile, the valley is swarming with Indian security forces who have turned Jammu and Kashmir into the world's largest prison. More in this report.
New Delhi revoked Jammu and Kashmir's status as a disputed territory on August the 5th. Since then, the area has been under total lockdown. Unable to leave their homes, buying essentials like food, fuel and medicine has become almost impossible for Kashmiris. Traders are also having a hard time making ends meet.
India has imposed the removal of Article 370 on us. It's like they have slapped us in our faces. But we will not sit idle. We will starve to death, but we will not compromise on our rights and our dignity. We will take our honor back.
The government in New Delhi says the curfew is necessary to prevent disorder after their move to make Kashmir part of the Indian state. But this argument only confirms that local citizens don't wish to be the part of the Indian state.
Police is outside. What can we do? We don't get anything and we are afraid. We can't go out and play. We can't go to school. We cannot do anything. We are only staying inside our home, and by staying inside the house, we will go mad.
Responding to international criticism of its illegal move, India says Kashmir is its internal matter, but a UN Security Council meeting on the issue on August the 16th shows this is not the case.
Sudan's military rulers and protest leaders have formally signed a historic power-sharing deal in Khartoum. The deal was inked during a ceremony attended by the leaders of Sudan's neighbors and other international dignitaries. The signing brings into effect a constitutional declaration agreed to on August the 4th. The transition deal was reached after months of public protests calling for civilian rule. The United States says Afghan peace talks are moving in the right direction. The White House statement came after US President Donald Trump met with his national security officials to discuss the dialogue with the Taliban. The meeting was attended by Defense Secretary Mark Esper, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Joseph Dunford. Trump described the meeting as very good, saying the US and Taliban are looking for a deal to end the war. US and Taliban representatives recently met for the 8th round of talks in Doha. The White House has approved an $8 billion sale of warplanes to Taiwan. The US State Department says Taipei will receive 66 F-16s under the deal. China's foreign ministry says it has lodged a solemn representation with the US against the sale. Spokesperson Hua Chunying says the deal violates the One China principle. This follows a $2 billion US arms sale to Taiwan in July. It included 100 tanks and 250 Stinger missiles. China considers Taiwan a renegade province. The purchase comes amid heightened trade tensions between the US and China. The US Justice Department has obtained a court warrant for the seizure of an Iranian tanker captured by British Marines off Gibraltar last month. The court order came after a Gibraltar judge allowed the release of the vessel detained for violating European Union sanctions on Syria. The warrant says the ship Grace 1 and the 2 million barrels of oil it carries are subject to forfeiture. It also ordered the seizure of $1 million from an account linked to Paradise Global Trading. The Justice Department claims that the company is associated with businesses acting for Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Meanwhile, the Grace 1 has been renamed, reflagged and moved from its position, but is still anchored at Gibraltar. 7 civilians have been killed in a Russian airstrike in the northern Syrian province of Idlib. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the air raid targeted a single-story home in the village of Dire Sharki. The War Monitor says 6 children and their mother were killed in the attack. It adds that the airstrike wounded 3 other people. The attack comes a day after a Russian air raid killed 15 civilians in the town of Has in Idlib. Over the past week, the Syrian army has advanced toward the rebel stronghold of Al-Sheikhoun. Israeli forces have wounded 67 Palestinians during weekly protests along the Gaza border. Palestine's health ministry says Israeli troops fired live ammunition and rubber bullets at the protesters. The demonstrations are calling for Israel to lift its blockade of the Gaza Strip. Officials say over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the start of weekly protests last year. A Palestinian driver was also shot dead by occupation forces after he allegedly entered an illegal Jewish settlement block in the West Bank. Meanwhile, Israeli warplanes have struck 3 Hamas underground bases in the north and center of the Strip. 2 ISIS militants have been killed in an Iraqi airstrike in the eastern province of Diyala. The head of Iraq's Security Committee, Sadiq al-Husseini, says 2 of the terrorist group's financiers have also been captured. Al-Husseini says security forces acted on intelligence reports. And despite repeated military operations, he says ISIS remnants are hiding out in rugged areas near the border with Iran. Yemen's Houthi rebels claim to have launched a series of drone attacks on Saudi Arabia. 3 drones targeted the Sheba oil field in eastern province, causing a minor fire at a gas plant. Oil industry executives say the attack did not affect oil production. Earlier, the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen shot down a drone heading for the Aba airport in the south of the kingdom. No casualties were caused by either. Tens of thousands of people have rallied in Hong Kong to show support for China amid ongoing protests in the region. They praised the authorities for their handling of the demonstration. Expressing concern, protesters said they cannot tolerate violent actions from anti-China demonstrators. A similar rally has also been held in Sydney. The protests in Hong Kong began in June over a controversial extradition bill. Russian opposition activists are staging another protest in Moscow after police detained thousands in recent demonstrations. The demonstrators defied a crackdown to demand free and fair elections for Moscow's city legislature. The protests are being held in single-person pickets, in which one person holds a protest sign at a time. The Election Commission has disqualified a number of opposition candidates on technical grounds. Protesters are demanding their candidates be allowed to contest September's local government elections. Earlier, the Moscow City Court overruled the Commission's decision, allowing opposition candidate Sergei Mitrokhin to contest the polls. Over 3,000 activists were arrested during the 2 recent demonstrations. And with that, we're going to take a break, but don't go anywhere, more stories to follow. Welcome back. Now, 8 people have been killed in a fire at a hotel in the Ukrainian port of Odessa. Emergency services said 10 others were injured in the blaze. It took firefighters over 3 hours to extinguish the fire, which incinerated an area of about 1,000 square meters. The authorities have not yet determined the cause of the blaze. Thousands of policymakers from 180 countries have gathered in Geneva to discuss plans to protect endangered species. Specialists will evaluate changes to regulations and species protection listings under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. The treaty regulates trade in over 35,000 species of plants and animals. The site's Secretary General, Ivon Higuero, says the conference will focus on extending protection to more species threatened by human activity. It will also devise mechanisms to help crack down on illegal trades and impose sanctions on countries that break the rules.
Very concerned at the prospect of further sales of stockpiled ivory. We saw the last sale back in 2008, and the following decade we've lost 100,000 savanna elephants, 60% of the forest elephants in Africa following that stockpile sale. And this has primarily been because these legal markets have opened up avenues for criminals to traffic illegal ivory into those markets and sell it.
This meeting in Geneva comes amid warnings about a rapid decline in animal and plant species. A recent UN report said that 1 million species are on the brink of extinction. However, a group of Bulgarian adventurers have set sail in a reed ship to test a theory that ancient Egyptian traders were able to cross the high seas.
Ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote that ancient Egyptian traders sailed as far as the Black Sea. Now Bulgarian adventurers will put his writings to the test. They will travel in a ship built with reeds from the Bulgarian port of Varna around the eastern Mediterranean to the island of Crete.
For the departure we are only 11, and we will sail from here via Burgas possibly to Istanbul. And then we will pass the Marmara Sea, Troy, Limnos. What is my scientific goal? And then we have to see. Many people speak about Egypt, Cyprus, Crete. Yes, maybe we will go there.
The adventurers boat with 2 tons of Toyota reed, 2 kilometers of rope, and is equipped with 2 sails. It is 62 meters long and 40 meters wide. The expedition's leader, Dominique Goelitz, is renowned
We want to demonstrate that this sailing technique is capable to cross the Black Sea, the Marmara Sea and the Aegean Sea.
The expedition's leader, Dominique Goelitz, is renowned for his sense of history and adventure. In 2007, he set out from New York. In 2007, he set out from New York for southern Spain to prove Stone Age man made similar transatlantic journeys.
Well, German and Swiss scientists have found abundant levels of microplastic pollution in Arctic snow. The scientists have warned of significant contamination of the atmosphere and demanded urgent research.
The widespread contamination of Arctic snow is an alarming situation. A team from the Alfred Wegener Institute analyzed snow samples in Germany. The scientists confirmed snow in all places contains high concentrations of plastic fragments. The worst contamination was found in samples from a rural area in Germany's southern province of Bavaria, totaling 154,000 particles per liter.
Scale, basically, where we used to just see plankton and zooplankton, now we're seeing quite a bit of plastic, both in the seawater, but now in the sea ice itself. And that's one thing that's interesting about sea ice. It's kind of a concentrator of everything that's in the water.
Researchers found particles of nitrile rubber, acrylates and paints containing plastics in the samples. The experts confirmed pollen from near the equator ends up in the Arctic.
We have been able to sample ice cores from multi-year ice and from first-year ice here in the Canadian Arctic archipelago, and I think this is the first time that we can show people the presence of microplastic in this area.
The United Nations estimates 100 million tons of plastic have been dumped in the oceans to date.
Now, as sea levels rise due to global warming, time is running out for Indonesia's capital city of Jakarta. Environmental experts warn a third of the city could be underwater by 2050. As weather patterns change, large swathes of land have already begun disappearing at a faster rate. Take a look. Indonesia's capital isn't only sinking because of rising temperatures. Rapid, out-of-control urbanization is also to blame. Without a piped water system, homes and local industry are forced to tap into natural aquifers. Experts say this practice causes some parts of Jakarta to sink 25 centimeters a year.
Back in 1981, this area was land, but it was muddy land. It could be flooded during a high tide, but just a little. Over the years, the water level is slowly rising.
The local government seems to have accepted the city's fate has already been sealed. Indonesian leader Joko Widodo has already announced the capital will be moving to the island of Borneo. Meanwhile, residents are hoping walls along the shoreline at the most vulnerable areas will keep the water from rising further.
Now, why has the water level become higher than my home? And I am now below water level? Maybe because the seawater is eating up the soil little by little. That's what I know. But luckily, we now have that seawall.
If groundwater extraction isn't curbed, the city could be gone within a few decades. Jakarta is home to 10 million residents. Hundreds of thousands of people have descended on Max Yasgur's alfalfa fields in New York to mark the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock Festival. Amid anti-Vietnam War protests, race riots and assassinations of figures like Martin Luther King, Woodstock's message of peace and love served as an antidote to the anger of young Americans.
I'm so happy to be here.
The Woodstock Festival is venerated as a beacon of hope that shone brightly in the tumultuous 60s. Its 50th anniversary kicked off with a performance by singer Arlo Guthrie, the son of folk revolutionary Woody Guthrie. He was one of the musicians who performed in that iconic 1969 weekend.
The fact that we're still here. Still singing, still playing, still going to shows and enjoying ourselves. Kept the spirit alive for a long time. And so here we are just trying to celebrate that. And thank you for showing up and being here.
The Woodstock Festival showcased a rock genre rooted in American folk. Aging hippies donning tie-dye kaftans, flower crowns and fringed Suede vests hark back to the golden age of peace, love and music. People return to the venue 50 years later to remember their youth and how their lives changed forever.
69, it's changed a tremendous amount. The weather is much better, but it's a good feeling to come back. I was 19 when I came out here and it was quite an experience.
The historical Woodstock site is now operated by a non-profit group which holds regular concerts and runs a museum to honor the Woodstock legend.
Well, peace and love is something that definitely where the world needs at the moment. But with that, we're going to take another break, but don't go anywhere. Business, sports and weather to follow. Welcome back, and first up in the world of business, the US has excluded some Chinese-made household furniture, baby goods and internet modems from its next round of tariffs. The US Trade Representative's office says the 10% duties are scheduled to go into effect on September the 1st. It says 44 categories of goods are no longer subject to punitive tariffs on $300 billion worth of Chinese exports. The excluded goods, which also include some chemical compounds, are worth about $7.8 billion a year. Earlier this week, the US delayed the imposition of more than half of its proposed tariffs until December the 15th. Chinese and US trade representatives will hold another round of talks in 2 weeks' time. First up in sports, let's talk tennis. World number one Novak Djokovic has advanced to the semi-finals of the Cincinnati Masters after beating Frenchman Lucas Pouille in straight sets. Pouille offered stiff resistance to Djokovic in the first set before the Serb took the tiebreaker. Djokovic then cruised to victory in the second set to take the match 7-6, 6-1. Djokovic will face 8th-ranked Russian Daniil Medvedev in the semi-finals. In the other quarter-final action, Frenchman Richard Gasquet defeated 11th-seeded Spaniard Roberto Bautista Agut in a tough 3-setter. Meanwhile, women's world number one Naomi Osaka of Japan has pulled out of the Cincinnati Masters due to a knee injury. Her quarter-final retirement comes a couple of weeks before the US Open, where Osaka is due to defend her crown. Osaka was trailing America's Sofia Kenin in the third set of their quarter-final in Cincinnati when she sought treatment for her left knee. After briefly returning to play, Osaka retired with Kenin leading 6-4, 1-6, 2-love. Arsenal beat Burnley 2-1 at Emirates Stadium as Emerick Aubameyang scored the winner in the English Premier League. This is the first time Arsenal have recorded successive victories at the start of the league since 2009. Alexander Lacazette opened the scoreline for Arsenal before Ashley Barnes equalised in the first half for Burnley. Aubameyang scored the winner in the second half, giving Arsenal their second consecutive win. Arsenal will travel to Liverpool on Saturday, while Burnley will play Wolves next Sunday. Brazilian midfielder Felipe Coutinho has joined German club Bayern Munich on a season-long loan. Coutinho joined FC Barcelona from Liverpool in January last year for an initial transfer fee of 120 million euros. Despite huge excitement around his signing, Coutinho struggled to establish a regular starting spot at the Camp Nou. He was also left out of Barcelona's squad for their opening La Liga fixture against Athletic Bilbao. The Brazilian has played 76 games for the Catalans in all competitions and scored 21 goals. Australia are all out for 250 runs in the second test of the Ashes series against England. The Aussies were 8 runs short of England's first innings total of 258. After losing 4 early wickets, Steve Smith played the role of a lone warrior. Smith scored 92 while his teammates fell around him. Stuart Broad was pick of the bowlers with 4 wickets for 65. England are 1-0 down in the series after their 251-run defeat to the Australian side. Sri Lanka now need 135 runs to beat New Zealand in their World Test Cricket Championship opener at Gale. They were 133 for no loss at the close of play on day 4 after bowling New Zealand out for 285 in the second innings. Sri Lanka's openers made it through the final session without losing their wickets. Dimuth Karunaratne amassed 71, while Lahiru Thirimanne added 57 runs. Earlier, wicketkeeper batsman Bradley Watling top-scored in the Kiwis' second innings with 77 to set Sri Lanka 267 runs to win. Italian cycling great Felice Gimondi has died at the age of 76 after suffering a heart attack while swimming in Sicily. Gimondi is one of only 7 riders to have won all 3 Grand Tours and also the Paris-Roubaix and Milano-San Remo Classics. In 1973, he won the World Road Race Championship in Barcelona. In a statement, the Italian Cycling Federation said Gimondi was a great champion and will always be remembered. Well, it's much cooler today here in Lahore at 26 degrees Celsius, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that was all I have from the news bulletin at the moment, but don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a few minutes with the news headlines. Stay tuned to Indus News, and as always, thanks for watching.